The people in the town all say that the only daughter of the water plant owner's family is a mediocre and useless flower lover. Shui Huaizhu opened her eyes and found out that she was dressed as the only daughter of a factory director who had been outnumbered by scumbags. She kicked scumbags and punished villains, while also promoting the clothing factory. At a young age, she had assets exceeding 100 million yuan and became one of the leading female entrepreneurs and outstanding young people in the province. And her enemies are imposing and incomprehensible. Looking both horizontally and vertically, there are only 3 words: rough, cold, and hard. Later, the enemy became famous all over the world. The delicate woman shouted at him on stage with tearful eyes, "You've earned more money than me. Can you come back and marry me?" He lowered his head and his eyes turned completely red. Keywords of the novel. Jiuling Jiao NV, found the most fierce rough man in the village without a pop-up window. Jiuling Jiao NV, found the most fierce rough man in the village. Download the complete text. Jiuling Jiao NV, found the most fierce rough man in the village. Read the latest chapter. Chapter 1. Saving you is my humiliation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Saving you is my humiliation. In late spring and early summer in Gaopa town, it's chilly to go out in the morning. By the sparsely populated pond, a proud voice broke the silence of dawn. "Shui Huaizhu, I want to be the team leader." "No way. Then go to hell." A haughty-looking woman reached out and forcefully pushed her into the pond. Shui Huaizhu woke up from extreme swelling and pain in her brain, still in a state of confusion, surrounded by suffocation from all directions. She opened her bewildered eyes in the water, and the next second her pupils tightened instantly. Didn't she die in a car accident? Why is the whole person immersed in water in the blink of an eye? She wanted to shout, but her throat was filled with water, and even her body was gradually sinking. The last string of small bubbles escaped from her lips, and the dizziness of death invaded her brain. Shui Huaizhu weakly closed her eyes. After a while, her falling body was suddenly lifted out of the water, and after the loud sound of the water, her cheeks were slapped several times. "Wake up!" A deep voice rang in her ear. She could hear it, but her eyelids seemed to be drooping, and no effort was made to open them. A curse sounded in her ear, followed by something cold and soft pressing against her lips, slowly and continuously pouring in a refreshing breath. She instinctively opened her mouth to breathe. Cough, cough. Quickly, turbid water coughed fiercely from her throat, and her chaotic consciousness gradually became clear. Shui Huaizhu slightly opened her eyes, and a tall man was reflected in her pupils. The man's eyebrows and eyes are sharp, his thin lips are cold and pursed, and a scar below his left eyelid is particularly gloomy. She couldn't help but stick it on and weakly wrapped her hands around his neck. Qin Ao's body froze, and the breath pressed against her ear was slightly burning. He lowered his eyes and looked at the person in front of him, making a cold voice. "Put your hands down." Shui Huaizhu shook her head, her cold face tightly pressed against him. Although he is very fierce, she is more afraid of drowning with a soft lump in his arms. Qin Ao let out a heavy breath and said, "If I don't let go, I'll leave you here." "I understand now." Fearing that he would really throw her away, Shui Huaizhu weakly withdrew her hand. Qin Ao passed his hand through her armpits to stabilize her, while his other hand vigorously paddled in the water, swimming towards the shore. She lowered her head, her blurred vision revealing his muscular arms. 10 seconds later, Shui Huaizhu was placed on the grass, and the sunlight pierced her eyes. She could only open her mouth slightly to catch her breath, and in the remaining light, she saw the man who was soaked all over take off his shirt, wring out a large amount of water, and the remaining water droplets on his body streaked through his sturdy chest and tight abdominal muscles. Qin Ao lowered his head and looked at her coldly. Under the sunshine, the delicate features of the girl were frighteningly pale, her slender body trembled uncontrollably with cold, and her watery eyes carried a hint of fear, indicating that she had been pampered since childhood. His gaze swept down, and her white shirt was wet and tightly pressed against her, accentuating her delicate curves with a graceful look. Chin Ao's gaze suddenly shifted away in the next second, and he lifted his foot to leave. In order to save her in the water, she had to resort to skin contact as a last resort. If his behavior is slightly inappropriate now, he will be drowned by the spit stars in town. Shui Huaizhu exerted all her strength before her little tail finger could touch the hem of his pants. "Please," she murmured in her voice, "don't leave." She didn't know why she wanted to keep him. This man had a solitary and fierce expression, but he gave her a very safe feeling. The cool and soft touch just touched Chin Ao's calf, like an electric shock, and he furrowed his brow to avoid it. Chin Ao didn't turn back, his back to Shui Huaizhu, and his voice was cold and firm. "Someone will come soon. This road is a must-pass route for Chunhua Clothing Factory, and workers will pass by in a few minutes. I'm cold." Although there was sunshine shining on her, the autumn wind blew one after another, making her shiver and want to shrink into a ball. Taking advantage of his momentary daze, Shui Huaizhu quietly hooked her fingers onto his pants and said, "What's your name?" She just wants to know the name of the life-saving benefactor so that she can thank him in the future. "Shui Huaizhu, are you deliberately humiliating me?" He rudely shook off her hand and gave a cold and fierce glance, quickly moving away, but it was enough for her to see the disgust in his black eyes. "Okay, saving you is my own shame. Get away from me in the future and don't dirty my eyes again." "Ah." Shui Huaizhu stared blankly at his angry back. She just wanted to ask the name of her benefactor. Why did it become a humiliation to him? And listening to his tone, he seemed to dislike her very much. Before she could figure it out, a piece of clothing was thrown over accurately, covering her wet upper body. Looking up again, the man disappeared. After a while, a rustling sound came from my ear. The sunlight made her eyes ache, and Shui Huaizhu couldn't open her eyelids. She could only see a woman standing tall and staring at her through the gaps in her eyes, which was hair-raising. "You were actually rescued." The woman muttered to herself and nervously scanned the quiet surroundings before suddenly reaching out and forcefully pushing her into the water. The fear of drowning invaded again, and Shui Huaizhu opened her mouth, making a rapid and hoarse sound. "Help, help." I probably didn't expect her to be awake, and the person pushing her trembled fiercely before moving faster. As soon as Shui Huaizhu was pushed to the edge of the pond and was about to fall again, the sound of workers speaking could be heard on the roadside. Shui Huaizhu held back her full strength and called out. "Help! Ha! What sound seems to be coming from over there? Is there anyone by the pond?" The sound followed the footsteps and came towards this side. The woman who pushed her gave her a hard squeeze, cursing her for being unlucky, and then jumped into the pond with a splash. Shui Huaizhu felt dizzy and her head was swollen, and she almost fainted when she pinched her. "Oh my goodness! Someone fell into the pond. Hurry up and save someone. Oh my! Isn't this the director's daughter?" In a chaotic scene of flying chickens and dogs, some were busy rescuing people, while others were busy carrying her on their backs and rushing towards the factory. As Shui Huaizhu's consciousness dissipated, she saw that the woman had already been saved, and people next to her were busy pressing her stomach. She took a deep breath and pointed at the woman, her voice weak and clear. "She pushed me into the water. Huaizhu. There's a big deal going on. Director Cheng is vigorously promoting his intention to get married." Su Haiyan ran to the office of Chunhua Clothing Factory in a panic, and before she could catch her breath, she couldn't wait to finish speaking. "Director Cheng is currently in the factory director's office. Huaizhu, go and take a look." In the simple and tidy office, Shui Huaizhu had already changed her wet clothes and sat at the desk in clean white clothes and pants. The mirror in her hand reflected her dazed face. Su Haiyan's voice pulled her back to her heart, and after a moment of silence, she said, "You go out first." Shui Huaizhu only then noticed that this factory director Qian Jin was a bit strange. Water Huaizhu loves director Cheng to the bone, which is something that all the workers at Chunhua clothing factory know. Knowing that director Cheng didn't like her, he even resorted to using his power to force her to get engaged. If he had heard that director Cheng was about to withdraw, he might have been in a hurry and cursing loudly, but now he was sitting motionless in a chair. Huaizhu, what's wrong with you? I see director Cheng is determined to get married this time and is willing to cause trouble in the factory. If you don't go back, you may really get divorced. Before Shui Huaizhu could finish speaking, Shui Huaizhu's voice suddenly became sharp. Get out. Shui Huaizhu was too scared to say anything more and quickly walked out. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Wearing to 90. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Wearing to 90. Looking at herself in the mirror, Shui Huaizhu took a deep breath to calm the inner turmoil. She actually crossed over. Now is 1994 in the early 1990s. Her fiancé A Cheng Liye was a worker who was demoted from the city to Gaopa town. He was an outstanding-looking man, and the original owner fell in love with him the first time he saw him. Regardless of his ability or not, he insisted on crying and demanding that his father promote Cheng Liye to the position of director of a clothing factory, and used this as a blackmail to get engaged to her. The original owner thought that after getting engaged, Cheng Liye would also like her, but no matter how much she lowered her price to please him, he despised her and only had his white moonlight Zhong Miao Miao in his heart. In the end, the original owner married him as he wished, but after marriage, Cheng Liye did not go home once a year and built a new love nest outside to live with Zhong Miao Miao. And the original owner, this big idiot, in order to please Cheng Liye, and under his instigation, he cried repeatedly to his father, gradually transferring the rights of the clothing factory, causing the family to bear a huge debt under the fierce wind and rain. She watched her parents jump off the factory with heart-wrenching eyes, and Cheng Liye even said to her, Shui Huaizhu, hurry up and jump down too. Jump. His ferocious and disgusted face was vividly visible. Shui Huaizhu covered her heart and almost couldn't catch her breath. Although these are memories of the original owner, once deeply ingrained in her brain, it feels like the painful life she has experienced. Because of her own stubbornness, she ruined her father's lifelong efforts in managing things. And it also caused the parents to have a bad ending. The office door suddenly opened, and Shui Huaizhu's face was full of anxiety, but she didn't dare to get too close. Huaizhu, the factory director, called you over. Shui Huaizhu felt that at this moment, Shui Huaizhu had a very fierce aura on her body, which was completely different from her usual unruly and capricious appearance. Water Huaizhu looks at Shui Huaizhu, her little sisters, and her eyes are soft. All the workers in the factory were teasing her behind her back for being shameless and leaning against men. Every time, it was Shui Huaizhu who screamed and helped her argue and maintain her reputation. But in her past life, she drove away the only person around her who treated her well due to Zhong Miao Miao's instigation. Huaizhu, Shui Huaizhu's voice was calm. Please do something for me. In the factory director's office, before Shui Huaizhu could approach, she heard her father's thunderous anger at Shui Huaishan. Cheng Liye, don't be ignorant. My daughter has been raised like a golden pearl and jade leaf since childhood, and now she is willing to marry you. It is a blessing that your Cheng family has cultivated for several lifetimes. Director of the water plant, Cheng Lifu, cannot bear the love of the daughter. Since you forced me to get engaged to her, I have been waking up every night in the middle of the night from nightmares. Standing outside the door, Shui Huaizhu could hear Cheng Liye's resolute and disgusted tone. This man really doesn't like her. With a light sigh, Shui Huaizhu's heart was extremely sour. The original owner was ashamed of everyone, but only Cheng Liye had a clear conscience. In his past life, in order to beg him not to leave, the original owner turned a blind eye and allowed him to hang out with Zhong Miao Miao outside. In order to cater to him, she, who has never cooked before, studies recipes every day, and her delicate and fair hands are covered with traces of being scalded by oil. The original owner took care of his life like a servant, but he was furious with Zhong Miao Miao because of her crying. Her parents have been holding the pearl in their hands since childhood, humble like a dog in front of him, and he even feels that their whole family is sorry for him. Shui Huaizhu pushed the door open and said, "Director Cheng is so eager to withdraw because I pushed Zhong Miao Miao into the water." That's right. The person pushing her into the water is Zhong Miao Miao. The white moonlight in Cheng Lia's heart. At the moment before she fainted, it was pointed out that Zhong Miao Miao was the one who pushed her into the water, but she was unexpectedly knocked down. During the time when Zhong Miao Miao fainted, she cried pitifully and swore that she had seen her fall into the water. She rushed over to save someone, but after being rescued, Shui Huaizhu even pushed her into the water. The two people in the office looked at Shui Huaizhu at the same time. Shui Weishan quickly put down his anger and stood up. "Huaizhu. For this only child, Shui Wei Mountain is also helpless. In his opinion, his daughter is beautiful and well-behaved, so there is no need to marry the superficial Cheng Lia. He endures injustice every day, but his daughter is willing, which makes him headache a lot." Cheng Lia didn't expect Shui Huaizhu to come over, and his eyes were filled with indifference towards the licking dog that was close to him. "Shui Huaizhu, you knowingly ask, I can't tolerate such a vicious woman by my side," he said. If Shui Huaizhu from a previous life saw Cheng Lia's contemptuous gaze, she would feel much heartbroken. But now she has completely given up on this man. She didn't even glance at Cheng Lia, and at this moment her only eyes were on her doting father. Shui Weishan, with his unique vision and bold heart, worked hard to create his own career in this ever-changing 1990s. He was originally a highly praised figure, but he was only obedient to her, which added a stain of being an adopted daughter and not teaching to his glorious reputation. Shui Huaizhu was filled with guilt and said, "Dad, I never pushed Zhong Miao Miao into the water. That woman asked me to help her become the team leader, but I didn't agree. She jumped down and framed me herself." Upon hearing these words, Shui Weishan's heart was filled with mixed emotions. Since her daughter insisted on getting engaged to Cheng Lia, she never told him any grievances she had suffered. Whenever he asked her, she said Lia treated her very well. But everyone in the factory knows how Cheng Lia treated her, how can he hide it from him? He knew his daughter was being looked at, but it was not easy for him to get angry. "At this moment, I feel my daughter's dependence on him." Shui Weishan is both joyful and heartbroken, while also feeling a surge of anger. "A woman dares to play tricks on me." Factory director, Miao Miao is definitely not the kind of person that Shui Huaizhu said. Cheng Lia was eager to protect his beloved child and scolded coldly, "Shui Huaizhu, why are you so vicious? Miao Miao doesn't know how to swim, would she be foolish enough to use her life to frame you?" Before Miao Miao fell into a coma, she kept saying it wasn't your fault, she accidentally fell into the water herself. Do you really have a conscience? Conscience. The original owner went to great lengths to please him, even taking care of his family in the countryside and not daring to put on airs. Just because of Zhong Miao Miao's light and ethereal framing, he denied all the previous efforts of the original owner, and even asked her if she had a conscience. "Cheng Lia, what do you think is your confidence in shouting at me? How noble and fearless are you? I tell you, your confidence is based on my liking for you. No matter how you speak ill of me, you know I will protect you." Shui Huaizhu's eyes were filled with heartache, not because of Cheng Lia, but because of her father. Just like the original director's confidence, isn't it also based on the affection of her family? But in the past, she never knew how to be grateful. Cheng Lia was stunned, looking at Shui Huaizhu, who was eloquent in front of him. He felt a thumping sensation in his heart, and a sense of unease arose. This woman is stubborn, relying on her father as the factory director to do whatever she wants, even love can force others. He thought that Shui Huaizhu had already loved him to the point of being completely devoted, and even though he spoke ill of each other, he couldn't bear to leave him. You don't need to rush to argue for Zhong Miao Miao. I have no intention of pursuing her for the time being. Since your relationship is stronger than Jin Jian, I will fulfill you. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Are you eligible to divorce? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Are you eligible to divorce? Shui Huaizhu's eyes were clear as she carefully scanned Qingliye from head to toe. Besides, as a man who doesn't distinguish right from wrong, I'm too lazy to waste any more time, she said as soon as these words were spoken. Shui Huaizhu's eyes lit up instantly and he eagerly asked, Huaizhu, what do you mean? Dad, I'm getting married. Shui Huaizhu couldn't believe his ears, and his surprise overflowed with words. Really? Huaizhu, are you really willing to withdraw? Okay. Your engagement has been terminated. Shui Huaizhu was afraid that if it was too late, Shui Huaizhu would turn back and repeatedly agreed. He doesn't like Qingliye at all. This person is of no good except for his tall stature and decent appearance, and there is no distinction between good and bad, with insufficient characterization. As the director of the clothing factory, Qingliye was simply unable to take on the position. It was because his daughter kept crying in front of him before, and he could only admit it with his eyes closed. Qingliye surprisingly caused his daughter to suffer a lot of injustice. Upon hearing that Huaizhu was willing to divorce, Shui Huaizhu was very happy. Qingliye stood still for a while before finally regaining consciousness, suspecting that he was staring at Shui Huaizhu like a hallucination and saying, Are you willing to divorce? You didn't hear me wrong, Shui Huaizhu's bright eyes looked down. Otherwise, you think you have the right to divorce. Without her, Qingliye was just an ordinary worker sent to the town. It is completely unknown how long one will stay in Gaopa town and whether they can be transferred back to the city. In his previous life, Qingliye even recommended the original owner to go out and socialize and drink with the leaders in order to be transferred back to the city. From beginning to end, he only treated the original owner as a tool that could be used at will. Since the heavens have made her a pearl of water, it is her responsibility to correct the mistakes made by the original owner in her previous life. Not repeating the same mistakes, being deceived by scumbags and causing harm to her own parents, is her goal for a lifetime of rebirth. Looking at Shui Huaizhu's commanding posture, Qingliye felt as if he had been hit hard by a heavy blow. All along, Shui Huaizhu has been trying her best to please him and be submissive, making him unable to feel the difference in their identities. At this moment, he suddenly realized that his fiancée A.E. was the daughter of the factory director and a person of status in Gaopa town. Qingliye pursed his lips and remembered how Shui Huaizhu had treated him well. He actually didn't want to do too much. Shui Huaizhu. There's no need to withdraw. Qingliye spoke in a tone of charity, as long as you are willing to apologize to Miao Miao and promise not to make things difficult for her in the future, I can still reluctantly maintain our engagement. So, how could he refuse to withdraw from the marriage? Shui Huaizhu only finds sarcasm funny. What did she say before? Qingliye's aura was just based on the love of the original owner for him. Because the original owner was obsessed with him, how many benefits did it bring to him and his family? While enjoying her kindness, Qingliye also despised her for hindering his pursuit of true love. Qingliye, do you want me to apologize? You are such a person who knows right from wrong. Do you really think I would be foolish enough to bang against a big wall for you? Why don't you go out and pee and see what you look like? For him, the original owner suffered a lot of injustice, and in the end, he even caused her parents to jump off a building and die tragically. He even encouraged her to commit suicide, and his face was particularly unsightly when he became a destitute household. Qingliye knew she was obsessed with him and was willing to give her another chance, but he didn't expect to suffer her humiliation. Feeling embarrassed and angry, Qingliye suddenly turned around and pretended to be leaving. Shui Huaizhu, don't go around saying you're my fiancé A.E. anymore. I have nothing to do with you, Qing Liye. Humph, I'm afraid. Qing Liye snorted coldly in his heart. He said nothing, and Shui Huaizhu would definitely approach him like a licking dog in fear, crying and begging him not to leave. After waiting for a while, there was no movement behind him, and he had almost walked to the door. Qing Liye couldn't help but take a peek. Shui Huaizhu looked cold and said, "Dad, could you please help me handle my divorce?" Upon hearing this, Shui Huaizhu breathed a deep sigh of relief. He was really worried that his daughter's soft-hearted heart would agree to Qing Liye's terms just now. "Huaizhu, don't worry." Shui Huaizhu was as happy as he was about to celebrate the Chinese New Year. "Dad will immediately post a notice about his divorce and tell the whole town that you have nothing to do with Qing Liye anymore. Shui Huaizhu promises to do it, immediately send someone to handle it." Qing Liye stood there like a wooden block, unable to understand why the person who had been obsessed with him suddenly became abnormal. Until Shui Mountain frowned and called out to him, "Aren't you going out yet?" Before leaving, Qing Liye pretended not to give up and gave Shui Huaizhu a faint glance, then turned around and left without saying a word. Shui Huaizhu. This person is waiting for her to catch up. How many times she has been playing hard to get, when she is as confused as the original owner. After the matter was basically settled, a middle-aged woman dressed in a floral top hurriedly rushed to the factory director's office. When I saw Shui Huaizhu, the first thing I said was, "Huaizhu, do you really want to divorce and draw a clear line between you and Liye?" Shui Huaizhu looked up and her brain's memory told her that this person was Qing Xiaolan, the aunt of Qing Liye. Qing Xiaolan was born with a loud voice and was a typical uneducated and ignorant village woman who relied solely on stubbornness to survive. Thanks to the engagement between Qing Liye and her, Shui Huaizhu found a place for Qing Xiaolan to set up a small stall outside the clothing factory. In other words, Qing Xiaolan is the one who truly enjoys the benefits. As soon as she heard that her nephew and Shui Huaizhu had divorced, she didn't care about her stall and rushed over to inquire. "I got divorced." Shui Huaizhu has a faint voice. Qing Xiaolan always seeks benefits from the original owner and reminds Shui Huaizhu, who is Qing Liye's aunt, both inside and outside of every meeting. And the original owner, that idiot, in order to please Qing Liye's family, gave whatever Qing Xiaolan wanted. Who wouldn't bully her like this cowardly fool? Upon hearing Shui Huaizhu's personal confirmation, Qing Xiaolan strode forward and grabbed her hand. "I've heard all about it. This bastard wants to divorce, absolutely impossible. Huaizhu, please wait, Auntie will go catch Liye and come back to apologize for you." Shui Huaizhu looked at Qing Xiaolan's anxious and angry expression, and only felt amused in her heart. Unknowingly, people thought that Qing Xiaolan cared so much about her, but in fact, she was afraid that all the benefits she enjoyed would be gone after the two of them withdrew. After all, being able to set up a stall in such a good place outside the clothing factory relies entirely on the help and maintenance of Shui Huaizhu. Shui Huaizhu gently pushed away Qing Xiaolan's hand and said, "Thank you for Aunt Cheng's kindness, but you don't have to blame your nephew. It's because I don't want to have any further involvement with Qing Liye." Seeing Shui Huaizhu's indifferent attitude, Qing Xiaolan immediately felt a bit panicked, but she quickly calmed down. "Huaizhu, don't be impulsive. Although you haven't put on a drink yet, everyone knows you're already a successful person. If you stubbornly withdraw from your marriage, you as a girl will suffer from the ridicule of the whole town, laughing at you as a broken shoe." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Essentially, he is a ruthless character. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Essentially, he is a ruthless character. In the early 1990s, the social atmosphere was still very conservative and old-fashioned. Especially in rural areas, the status of women is generally low, and a rumor can ruin their life. Qing Xiaolan is one of the most powerful, deliberately speaking very harshly. The meaning inside and outside of her words is that if Shui Huaizhu withdraws, she will be a broken pair of shoes. No man dares to take you in the future. Before Shui Huaizhu could make a sound, Shui Weishan frowned on the side. He doesn't like Qing Liye, but he also knows that what Qing Xiaolan said is true. And at the time of engagement, Huaizhu was afraid that Qing Liye would back out, so she made a big fuss and invited all the relatives of both parties in the countryside to testify. In other words, if she withdraws now, Shui Huaizhu's reputation will not only be tarnished in Gaopa town, but even people from several nearby villages will gossip about her. But to make Shui Weishan accept Qing Liye hard, he felt as uncomfortable as swallowing a fly. Shui Weishan looked at his daughter, and Huaizhu was also looking at him. His eyes were watery, as if he was suddenly frightened by Qing Xiaolan's words and had no idea. Qing Xiaolan sneered in her heart. Son of a bitch, you want to get rid of my Qing family. No way. Huaizhu, not afraid. Shui Weishan bit his teeth and said, Dad can take care of you for a lifetime. Oh my. Water plant manager. Qing Xiaolan patted her thigh and said, Do you have someone like you, a confused dad? Huaizhu, don't listen to your father. Can a girl never get married for a lifetime? Then she can't spit out someone else's saliva to death. Qing Xiaolan turned around and pulled her, Come on, Auntie will take you to find Liye. You two should be honest. Liye is someone who cares about the big picture and won't abandon you. This time, with a reason, Qing Xiaolan chose to forget that it was Shui Huaizhu who wanted to divorce, and generously said that Liye would not abandon you. Qing Xiaolan pulled hard twice, but Shui Huaizhu didn't move. She looked up and couldn't help but feel a thump in her heart when she met her indifferent gaze. Aunt Qing from the Qing family. Shui Huaizhu shook off Qing Xiaolan's hand and said in a faint voice, Do you really think that the object of ridicule from outsiders is me? Qing Xiaolan felt suffocated. Under Shui Huaizhu's eyes, a glimmer of essence flashed. What she had asked Su Haiyan to do before was to go out and promote how Qing Liye and Zhong Miaomiao sneaked around after their engagement. It was only when she discovered Zhong Miaomiao that she was in a hurry to kill her and push her into the water. It's best to portray her vividly, portraying her as a vulnerable person who has suffered a lot of harm. If you don't want to be morally constrained by others, then stand on the moral high ground and restrain others first. Is it pitiful for a girl who is being cuckolded by her fiancé before she gets married? Qing Liye and his wife are likely to be spit on by the outside men and aunties for half of their lives. Li Yibu, Qing Xiaolan stuttered, is not that kind of person. Isn't that the kind of person you would rush to persuade? Shui Huaizhu was too lazy to argue with her anymore and said to Shui Weishan, Dad, could you please help me handle the rest of the matter? Shui Weishan wished he could handle it. He was most afraid that his daughter would soften her heart halfway and be captivated by Qing Liye's sweet words. Huaizhu, you go home first. Your mother also knows about your drowning and is worried at home. Watching Shui Huaizhu leave, Qing Xiaolan stomped her feet anxiously and said, Water factory manager, look at this. You won't even persuade me. There was actually a hint of blame in the words. What do I persuade? Shui Weishan's voice was stern. Since getting engaged, how did Qing Liye turn a blind eye to Huaizhu? Just because I didn't say a word doesn't mean I don't know. Now that my daughter has regained consciousness, why do you want me to persuade her? Is it because Huaizhu has been tormented by your Qing family to be neither human nor ghost, that's why you're happy? Qing Xiaolan's face turned red and white as he spoke, and after hesitating for a while, she blurted out, The reputation of the girl who broke out is all bad. What's the point of suffering that little injustice? My daughter's reputation has nothing to do with your Qing family. Shui Weishan said in a deep voice, Aunt Qing, someone has come to inspect the clothing factory recently. Setting up a stall in front of the factory not only affects entry and exit, but also does not comply with hygiene regulations. Please pause the stall for a few days. Upon hearing this, Cheng Xiaolan suddenly became anxious. What she was most worried about was this matter. Water plant manager, my stall is very small and won't affect it. Look at me moving the stall further inside. I said I need to pause for a few days. Without waiting for her to finish speaking, Shui Huaizhu sternly interrupted, what's wrong with you? If you don't put the stall away later, don't blame me for having someone take action. Waiting for him to have someone take action is equivalent to confiscating all the utensils in the stall and handing them over. Cheng Xiaolan was cursing in her heart, but she dared not speak up anymore. She shrugged and pulled her face, repeatedly saying that she knew. I immediately went out to collect the stall. Before leaving, I was still a bit unwilling. Cheng Xiaolan asked again, so. Water plant director, how many days should we pause? Shui Huaizhu impatiently waved his hand and said, let's talk more. Shui Huaizhu had just come out of the factory director's office when Su Haiyan, who was already waiting by, quickly gathered up. Huaizhu, Director Cheng is saying everywhere that it's because of your malicious heart that he is determined to withdraw from the marriage. Let him speak. Shui Huaizhu shrugged nonchalantly. Cheng Liye is not surprised at all that she will make a fool of herself, otherwise how could she match Zhong Miaomiao? Bitches paired with dogs will last forever. I hope Cheng Liye and Zhong Miaomiao can be locked down and not come out again to harm others. Is that all? Compared to her calmness, Su Haiyan became a bit anxious. Huaizhu, although you made me preach that it was the two of them who were sorry to you. But the people outside listened to the wind and rain, and let Director Cheng speak recklessly. Soon, everyone turned to believe them. It's better to seize this opportunity, find someone to beat Director Cheng hard, let him control his mouth, and not spread rumors again. It's not yet time for Cheng to start his career. Shui Huaizhu said thoughtfully, if I continue to conflict with him, it will actually harm my reputation. Others will think that Cheng Liye is telling the truth and that I am angry and want to hit someone. Is it difficult to just let him talk nonsense and not teach him a lesson? Shui Huaizhu smiled and said, what I want is for everyone to think that Cheng Liye has been persistently beating me, begging me but not being able to do so, and regretfully approaching me like a dog, but I disdain it. Her voice was soft, but her words carried a hint of harshness. Su Haiyan unconsciously shuddered. Her friend turned out to be a ruthless character deep down. Shui Huaizhu saw Su Haiyan staring blankly at her and smiled sweetly, I just don't want others to bully me. Su Haiyan shook her mind. Yes, Huaizhu has always been delicate. It's all because Cheng Liye, that dog man, has gone too far and pushed people hard. Haiyan, there's another person I want to inquire about. Shui Huaizhu roughly gestured her height and said, he's so tall, he looks very masculine. Oh, by the way, the most obvious thing is a scar below his left eyelid. Before she could finish speaking, Su Haiyan had already widened her eyes. Huaizhu, why are you asking Qin Ao for so much? His name is Qin Ao. Shui Huaizhu said, he saved me. What? Su Haiyan jumped 3 feet high and said, did your enemy save you? End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Is her enemy? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 is her enemy. Qin Ao is her enemy. Shui Huaizhu stayed for a few seconds, and soon a memory emerged from deep in her brain. Qin's father was originally a worker at Chunhua clothing factory, but his character was not good. He was late for work and left early, so let's not mention him. The most serious mistake I made was stealing a new batch of clothing from the factory a year ago, which resulted in the factory not being able to deliver on time and causing significant economic losses. In a fit of anger, Shui Huaizhu dismissed Qin's father. But Qin's father stopped doing it. Holding a loudspeaker and shouting everywhere, saying that Shui Huaizhu had a verbal agreement with him that they were in-laws and even expelled their own in-laws. Shui Huaizhu is inhumane. When asked by others, it turned out that it was only at a banquet that Qin's father had drunk too much and insisted on getting married at Shui Huaizhu Mountain without letting anyone go. Shui Huaizhu Mountain was also drunk in a daze at the time, thinking to go home and rest quickly. Getting annoyed by the entanglement, he casually responded jokingly. I didn't expect to be picked up by Qin's father like this. And Qin's father is a scoundrel. He didn't care if Shui Huaizhu was joking at the time, he just insisted that the two families were in-laws. What happened when my in-laws brought some clothes home? Is it necessary to dismiss him? The commotion escalated, and many people came over to watch, including the parties involved, Qin Ao and Shui Huaizhu. Qin Ao looked embarrassed and wanted to bring Qin's father home. Qin's father grabbed his hand and shouted, "Son, Dad has found you the most beautiful daughter. Law in the whole town. Who is your daughter? Law. You're shameless." A year ago, it was precisely when Shui Huaizhu, who was originally infatuated with Qin Liya, was so infatuated that she heard Qin Fu publicly say that she was Qin Ao's daughter. Law. She was so angry that she couldn't help but curse him so badly that she couldn't help but pick up the scissors that cut the fabric next to her and smash them. Even if I have a crush on the dogs in the village, I won't have a crush on you, this poor and worthless stinky man. Scissors hit Qin Ao's face evenly amidst everyone's frightened gaze, and the sharp end slashed heavily under his left eyelid. Drink. Shui Huaizhu took a deep breath of cold air. Huaizhu, do you remember? Su Haiyan also spoke in a frightened tone. You made the scar under Qin Ao's eyelids. Do you say he is your enemy? Anyway, at that time, Qin Ao's blood on his face was particularly terrifying. Even the troublemaker Qin's father dared not speak up and was forcibly pulled away by his gloomy and indifferent demeanor. Shui Huaizhu held on to her heart, which was still pounding fiercely after being shocked. She wanted to cry without tears and said that she was also very innocent. She didn't know that the original owner had done such a thing before. No wonder Qin Ao dislikes and despises her. If it were for her face being scratched, it would be possible to kill the other party. I didn't expect Qin Ao to be willing to save you. Su Haiyan was puzzled and said, isn't he the one who hates you the most? After that, the reputation of the Qin family was considered bad in Gaopa town. Not only were they accused of sneaking around, but they also mocked Qin Ao's toad for wanting to eat swan meat. From then on, Qin Ao, who was originally quiet, became even more solitary and silent, like a lone wolf living in seclusion. Every time I see Shui Huaizhu, I unintentionally show her fierce gaze, so almost everyone in the town knows that Qin Ao hates her. Shui Huaizhu tugged at the corner of her mouth and said, perhaps he does a good deed every day. Ah! Su Haiyan suddenly remembered something and lowered her voice, Huaizhu, do you think Qin Ao saved you just to beg for money? After all, everyone in the town knows how poor the Qin family is. Due to Qin's father's misconduct, almost no one is willing to interact with that family again, so naturally they cannot find any good jobs. Qin Ao can only earn a few cents a day by doing cheap labor, and in 1994, there were hardly any families who couldn't eat enough. However, the Qin family can only eat clear soup and porridge every day, and even a piece of meat can only be eaten once every few months. The director of the water plant loves you so much, and will definitely repay your life-saving benefactor heavily. Su Haiyan became more and more certain as he said, Qin Ao may not be able to open the pot, so he went into the water to save you. Shui Huaizhu hesitated for 2 seconds, shook her head, and said, no. Qin Ao looked very difficult to get along with, and he even disliked her. After rescuing her, he didn't even look at her in the eye and said to stay away from him in the future. If it was really to beg for money, he would have stayed by her side and even shouted loudly, saying that he had saved the factory director's daughter. And Shui Huaizhu recalled the feeling of meeting Qin Ao for the first time. He gives people a strong and composed feeling, and with his abilities, even in the current difficulties, he may soon be able to show off his skills and have a promising future. After all, in 1994, the early 1990s, it was an era full of opportunities, where even pigs could fly into the sky while standing at the forefront. I don't think so. Shui Huaizhu shook her head and said, I'll go home and see my mom first. Qin Ao will definitely repay her life-saving kindness, but she didn't know how to repay it for a moment. She thought of going to find him again. The Shui family lives in the best house in Gaopa town, a 3.5-story small building surrounded by a large courtyard. Upon returning home, Shui Huaizhu headed straight to her parents' room on the 3rd floor based on the impression in her mind. Before she could open the door, there was a sound of heavy objects falling to the ground in the room, which frightened her and made her move faster. As soon as the door opened, I saw my mother Yi Meiying sitting on the ground, surrounded by a mess of blankets and clothes. Mom! After all, she was not her own biological mother. Shui Huaizhu thought it was difficult to cry out, but perhaps it was the residual emotions from her original body. When she saw Yi Meiying's helpless appearance, she blurted out and quickly walked in to reach out for help. You didn't fall, did you? Huaizhu. As soon as Yi Meiying saw her, tears welled up in her tired eyes and she eagerly stroked her face and hands everywhere. I heard you fell into the water. Did you get hurt anywhere? Have you seen it at the hospital? Yi Meiying repeatedly asked, her tone urgent and trembling, and Shui Huaizhu finally interjected a sentence. Mom, didn't I stand here properly? Come on, I'll help you up first. Mom is really useless. Yi Meiying leaned against her daughter and the two of them worked hard for a while before finally sitting back on the bed, tears still streaming down her face. I heard you had an accident, so I can't rush over to see you in time. Watching her self-blaming expression, Shui Huaizhu couldn't help but feel her eyes bulging and her nose turning sour in an instant. Children run from birth to mothers run to death. When Yi Meiying was pregnant with water, she had difficulty giving birth. Although she managed to save her life, she also fell ill. Over 300 days a year, at least 300 days are spent lying in bed. But before, the original owner did not show much understanding towards Yi Meiying and always felt ashamed of having a sick mother. Even though Yi Meiying took care of her like a pearl in her palm and gave her the best things at home, she didn't get a good face. Someone saved me. Shui Huaizhu stuffed a pillow behind Yi Meiying, making her feel more comfortable. Before she could finish a sentence, a piercing sound sounded outside the door. Xiao Ping, come over quickly. Your cousin is going to drown, so you can adopt him to the uncle's family today. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Protecting the Young. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Protecting the Young. The door was rudely pushed open, and an old woman and an aunt rushed in with a 7- or 8-year-old boy. Shui Huaizhu couldn't react for a moment and her expression was a bit stunned. Until Yi Meiying exhausted all her strength to pull her behind her, while raising her chin to face the incoming person, her voice was unpleasant. Did you forget to knock on the door before entering my room? The visitor didn't expect Shui Huaizhu to come back, staring wide and wide, creating an awkward atmosphere. Until the little boy broke his silence and said, Milk, do I really want to be uncle's son? Before he could finish speaking, the ant next to him quickly covered his mouth. But it's already too late. What are you talking about? Being an uncle's son. Yi Meiying sneered and sat up straight, waving to the little boy, Xiaoping, come tell your aunt, who said you want to be uncle's son. Tian Guifeng held her son back, but Yi Meiying held a shiny candy in her hand. After all, Shui Xiaoping was just a child and couldn't resist the temptation. She broke free from her mother's hand and rushed forward. Auntie, Nai, and Mom both said that my cousin is going to drown, and my uncle's family has no offspring. They want to adopt me as your son. Hey! Tian Guifeng's face was full of embarrassment and anger, wishing to twist her son's ear and pull him over. Sister-in-law, don't listen to the children's lies. I'll beat them to death later. Huaizhu is lucky, how could he easily drown? Upon hearing this, combined with the memories in her mind, Shui Huaizhu instantly understood everything. Her grandmother gave birth to 2 sons, the eldest son is her father Shui Huaizhu, and the youngest son is her uncle Shui Huaizhu. Although they are brothers, their personalities have been different since childhood. Shui Huaizhu is intelligent and eager to learn. He went all the way to vocational school and became a national assigned employee. He also became a factory director with his skills. When his relatives and friends mentioned him, they all gave him a thumbs up, praising his glorious ancestors. On the contrary, Shui Huaizhu did not love studying since childhood. If it weren't for the support of Shui Huaizhu, who found him a job as a gatekeeper in a clothing factory, he would have had to work as a farmer in the fields for his entire life. In theory, Shui Huaizhu can live his life safely with his elder brother's help as long as he doesn't have any extramarital issues. However, he found a wife who is the most calculating and cunning. Do you curse my daughter to drown? Yi Meiying frowned and said, you bastard, just talk and spread rumors with your upper lip touching your lower lip, right? Although her face turned pale due to physical reasons, her aura of protecting her cubs was not lacking. Shui Huaizhu was protected by Yi Meiying behind her, unable to even say a word. Yi Meiying was not a good person to criticize, nor did she change her temper just because she was trapped in a hospital bed all year round. On the contrary, because her precious daughter was born at the cost of her life, and she held the pearl in her palm to cherish it, otherwise it would not have nurtured the original owner's rebellious and capricious personality. Now that I heard my family curse Huaizhu for drowning, I was naturally quite angry. The words were directed towards Tian Guifeng, and in fact, even the old lady next to me cursed. Who would curse their granddaughter for drowning? The old lady of the Shui family spoke loudly and was unwilling to be outdone. But it's not our fault either, America or Britain. You and Huaizhu only have Huaizhu as our daughter, and the second family has 2 sons. Isn't it appropriate to adopt one for you? Anyway, you are also the child of your own brothers, and there is also a blood relationship to some extent. That's right. Because her mother suffered a great loss of vitality after giving birth to her, she was unable to conceive again, and in the eyes of a man over woman grandmother, having no son was a great sin. In addition, with the eldest son having the ability, what if he were to give a loser the family wealth he had saved up in the future? That is, she would take all of it with her. So in the past 2 or 3 years, my grandmother and aunt have been trying different ways to adopt Shui Xiaoping and Shui Huaizhu. As long as Shui Xiaoping is nominally the son of Shui Huaizhu, then he can inherit everything here openly in the future. After all, there is an unwritten custom among rural people that everything in their homes is passed down from male to female. These people, just like Qing Liye, are also bullying her as an only child, and everyone has a despicable and ugly face that eats out of the household. These 2 people are skilled at calculating, but Yi Meiying is not a fuel-efficient lamp either. Mom, you still know about blood ties. Yi Meiying said angrily to the old lady, isn't Huaizhu your own granddaughter? You usually prefer the 2 grandsons of the second family and often sneak around to give them things from me. I'm not unaware, but I'm just too lazy to take care of them. If you dare to curse my daughter half a word more, I'll immediately go to the police station and say you're stealing things. If you don't ask, you're stealing. Shui Huaizhu silently gave her mother a thumbs up. She knew that the old lady and second aunt of the Shui family were difficult to deal with, and just now she was thinking about how to make them retreat despite difficulties. Unexpectedly, she didn't need to take action at all, and her mother's combat power alone was more than enough. Shui Huaizhu lowered her head. Her fingers are delicate and slender, and her skin is white and smooth, indicating that she has never worked before. In this patriarchal family environment, she was able to be pampered as a girl, without any contact with the sun or spring water, thanks to the love and hard work of her parents. Unfortunately, the original owner never cared about his parents' kindness before, and in the end, He caused them to die tragically. Who stole something? Old Lady Shui's face turned red and her ears turned red when her eldest daughter Law spoke, and she couldn't help but become angry and embarrassed. Yi Meiying, do you still consider me your mother? Law. Just tell me that I stole your little things. I worked hard to cultivate talent for my boss. Before, my family was so poor that he had to study, and they tightened their belts to send him to school. Now that everything is good, you repay me like this. My life is hard. The old lady started pounding her heart and crying loudly, almost lying down and throwing tantrums on the spot. Grandma. Shui Huaizhu raised her hand and said, "You're wrong." After Dad got admitted to vocational school, the government provided him with money to study, and he also had a monthly living allowance. Dad couldn't bear to use it, so he took it all back for you. My father was a vocational school student in the early 1970s. During that time, many scholars were rare and precious. As long as he could get into vocational schools or universities, he relied on the government's funding. You shut up. The old lady Shui got angry when she saw the girl Shui Huaizhu and spat at her. Her own baby was scolded, and Yi Meiying snorted coldly. It seems like the good days are coming to an end. Alright, starting from today, we'll split up. The water old lady opened her mouth and remained silent. Hey, sister. Law, don't be angry. Tian Guifeng next to her was just like a deaf person, letting the old lady make a fuss. Anyway, she took advantage of it. It's best if the old lady causes a lot of trouble and can push her son to uncle's side as soon as possible. As soon as she heard Yi Meiying say she wanted to split up, she hurriedly spoke up and tried to smooth things out. Mom just casually said, "Our family is fine. What family should we split up into? Of course you don't want to split up." Yi Meiying sneered, "The house was also built by us. Pack up your things and get out of here immediately." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. I don't rare raising things like you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. I don't rare raising things like you. The houses in the town were built by Shui Weishan, who went all out as the factory director and borrowed a sum of foreign debt. Firstly, in order to be close to the clothing factory and convenient for commuting, the second is to provide a good growth environment for my daughter. And others only have houses in rural areas. But on the day the house was built and moved in, Mrs. Shui didn't say hello and led the whole family to live in without authorization, claiming that they were all one family and couldn't live separately. Yi Meiying argued with reason at the time. She knew who the old lady and second aunt were, and there would definitely be no peace after they moved in. The old lady immediately rolled around and scolded them for not having a mother if they lived a good life. She was a heartless white-eyed wolf and even took out the deceased old man to speak. Shui Huaizhu gritted her teeth and could only agree. The condition is that they can stay, but they cannot make a fuss. At the beginning, on the surface, everyone got along relatively peacefully, except for the old lady who would occasionally steal good things to support the second family. Yi Meiying also turned a blind eye. Anyway, with her sitting at home, no one can move anything belonging to her daughter. What she can take away is the corners she doesn't want. But since Shui Huaizhu got engaged, the old lady and Tian Guifeng couldn't hold back any longer, fearing that she would take all the things from the Shui family after getting married. They were picking up trouble openly and secretly, saying the so-called big truth, and wanted to adopt Shui Zhaoping to Shui Weishan. Yi Meiying can't bear it anymore. Eat and live from me, and even covet things from my daughter. I don't care about raising things like you, get out of here. Yi Meiying was emotional and didn't finish speaking, and she coughed violently. Mom. Shui Huaizhu quickly stroked her back. Seeing Yi Meiying really angry, Shui Lao Tai and Tian Guifeng quickly exchanged glances, and in the end, Tian Guifeng stepped forward to smooth the situation. Sister-in-law, why don't you rest well? Let's go out first. Get out of my house. Cough, cough, cough. This time, I almost coughed up my lungs in a terrifying way. The two of them pretended not to have heard Yi Meiying's words and walked out without hesitation. Before leaving, Mrs. Shui seemed to be infuriating, and her voice spoke in a moderate tone. How much did the sick seedling spend on my son lying in bed all day? It's unlucky that he won't even have a son, and his temper is quite good. How dare you drive the old lady away? Pooh! You! Yi Meiying tightened her body and wanted to scold her, but Shui Huaizhu beside her grabbed her hand in time. Milk, since you despise us so much. The girl's delicate voice was steady and steady. Second auntie, she has given birth to 2 sons. You can live with second auntie and them in the future and let them care for you. Don't you have to eat bran and congee every day when you live with the second family? Old Lady Shui's face was ugly, and she really wanted to turn around and teach the loser, Lian Shui Huaizhu, a severe lesson. However, she also knew that the boss, like Yi Meiying, was the only daughter who loved her very much. If he touched Shui Huaizhu, the boss might really drive her out overnight. Mom, don't pay attention to that girl. The two of them walked away, and Tian Guifeng stared at the old lady's gloomy face and flattered, saying, Big brother is filial and will definitely not drive us out. Tian Guifeng is well aware that in this family, she can only get a share of the pie by pleasing the old lady. Wei Shan will definitely not drive me away, I am his own mother. Old Lady Shui vented her anger on her second daughter. In law and said, what's the use of keeping it? You're always lazy and lazy. Mom, Tian Guifeng defended herself wrongly, didn't I have to take care of Xiaoping and Xiaodong? They are the precious grandchildren of the Shui family. Do they still need you to take care of them? Old Lady Shui rudely poked through and said, one is 7 years old, the other is 6 years old. You're already in elementary school, so you're just lazy. Forget it, you can't even scold a sick seedling. It's better for me to have a dog than for you. Tian Guifeng's face turned blue and red after being scolded, but she dared not speak back and could only respond obediently. After scolding a few more words, the old lady turned around and went downstairs to feed the chickens. Why am I useless? Until Mrs. Shui walked away, Tian Guifeng's face changed and she pointed in the direction she was leaving, cursing, I gave birth to your eldest grandson from the Shui family. Your whole family should thank me. Her belly is full of vitality, she is the great hero of the water family. What's wrong with the boss's family making money? It's not just about giving birth to a loser. Mom, take a sip of water. Shui Huaizhu poured some water and blew it to cool before delivering it to Yi Meiying's mouth. Don't get excited, it's not worth it with those popular and unhealthy bodies, she said. Yi Meiying remained motionless and stared at her in a daze. Mom. Shui Huaizhu let out a puzzled cry. The next second, 2 lines of clear tears rolled down Yi Meiying's face, startling her. Mom, where are you feeling unwell? I'll take you to the hospital. No, Mom, this is happy. Yi Meiying took her hand and said, my daughter has grown up. She not only helps her mother with her affairs, but also takes care of others. In just one sentence, Shui Huaizhu felt embarrassed. In the past, Shui Huaizhu felt embarrassed every time she came to argue with her grandmother and aunt, so she hid to the side. Anyway, her parents are carrying the weight for her to move forward. Thinking about it, I am truly ashamed and have no face to face my mother lying in the hospital bed. My daughter poured sweet water. Yi Meiying drank the water in one breath and didn't forget to smack her mouth. It's the sweetest water my mom has ever tasted, she said. There's no need for that. Shui Huaizhu touched her nose and said, Mom, I used to be immature, but I will correct it in the future. My daughter is filial. Yi Meiying began to shed tears again. Shui Huaizhu quickly changed the topic and said, Mom, I have already divorced Qinglia. What? Yi Meiying suddenly stopped her tears and looked incredulous. Huaizhu, are you serious? Yi Meiying is well aware of how much her daughter is infatuated with the little white face of Qingliye. She also looked down on Qingliye. Since she got engaged to her daughter, she only came to see her once. His face was still foul-smelling, and his mouth was tightly shut like a mute, as if he saw his future mother. Law on the guillotine. Unfortunately, my daughter likes it, and even crying, she wants to marry him. Yi Meiying was worried that this little white-faced girl would not be able to live a good life for her daughter in the future. She didn't expect to hear about her divorce. Did the Bodhisattva hear her make a wish at night? Really? Shui Huaizhu was extremely serious and said, after falling into the water, I realized that I didn't like Qingliye at all. I was just blinded before. Really? Yi Meiying remained skeptical and repeatedly confirmed, girl, you're not trying to coax me, are you? Shui Huaizhu shook her head and stopped talking. Before, the original owner was so infatuated with Qingliye, no wonder her mother didn't believe her, but it's okay, time can prove everything. And there's one more thing. Shui Huaizhu opened her big eyes and waited for her mother to speak. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Snatching for food. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Snatching for food. Girl, Yi Meiying couldn't help but ask, I can't go out, but I heard someone saved you. Who is it? Qin Ao. Shui Huaizhu said, Mom, he jumped into the water and saved me. Qin Ao. Two startled voices rang out simultaneously. Shui Huaizhu looked towards the door, realizing that after dealing with the affairs in the factory, Shui Weishan couldn't rest assured, and ran back. I just heard what Shui Huaizhu said. Qin Ao. Yi Meiying hesitated for a few seconds and said, how could he save you? Mom, you don't know how dangerous I was at that time. Shui Huaizhu said with lingering palpitations, I've been sinking in the water and can't breathe at all. My daughter's fate is hard. Upon hearing this, Yi Meiying hugged the person and couldn't help but cry. The scene of almost drowning flashed through her mind, and Shui Huaizhu's eyes were also wet. I still have the mood to cry. Shui Weishan walked back and forth in the room and angrily scolded, now it's Qin Ao who saved her. His hair is almost turning white. Some rascals, once provoked, are like a dog's skin ointment that cannot be pulled away. And Qin's father is such a scoundrel. If he knew that his own son had saved Huaizhu, Qin's father would have had the courage to make trouble again. Who knows if, like last time, Qin's father would play pranks and insist that Huaizhu marry Qin Ao. Marry Qin Ao. After hearing her father's concern, Shui Huaizhu was stunned for 2 seconds before shaking her head and saying, I won't marry Qin Ao. Qin Ao hates her so much and treats her as an enemy. If she marries Qin Ao, wouldn't it be like repaying kindness with revenge? After all, who wants to face their enemies all day? Of course, you can't marry Qin Ao. Yi Meiying couldn't help but veto the possibility of Qin Ao becoming her son-in-law. She looks down on Qingliye and doesn't like Qin Ao. She has seen Qin Ao a few times, and he looks cold and reserved, not easy to get along with. This is not the point. The key is Qin's father, who is known for being lazy and sneaky in the town. If a daughter marries into such a family, wouldn't she have to work hard day and night to manage the family? Her beloved baby doesn't even have to work at her own house, she wants to work at someone else's house. No, no, no. Mom, Shui Huaizhu wanted to repay Qin Ao in her heart, but she didn't have anything valuable in her hands and could only seek help from her parents. If it weren't for Qin Ao, I wouldn't be able to come back today. Qin Ao saved you, so we naturally want to repay him. Shui Weishan was a sensible person who thought for a while and said, all right, I'll buy some gifts to thank you at my doorstep. I'll go with you. Without hesitation, Yi Meiying said, Lao Wei, remember to call me when you go. Are you going too? After staying for 2 seconds, Shui Weishan shook his head and said, I'll handle this matter. If you're not feeling well, rest more at home. Yi Meiying hasn't been out of the door a few times a month, and walking multiple times makes her easily pant. I have to go. Yi Meiying propped herself up and held Shui Huaizhu's hand, saying, he saved my daughter. How can I, as a mother, not thank him in person? The same thing belongs to the same thing. Although she doesn't like Qin Ao, she is very grateful that the other party saved Huaizhu. Moreover, the people in the town know that she rarely goes out. This time, personally coming to thank Qin Ao is equivalent to showing her sincerity. Shui Huaizhu said, why don't I just go with Dad? Don't go. Yi Meiying habitually protects her daughter and says, after you fall into the water, you don't know if you've been caught in the cold. Lao Wei, go to the kitchen and make a bowl of ginger soup for Huaizhu to drink. Shui Wei Mountain not only cooked a full bowl of brown sugar ginger soup, but also specially beat 2 eggs. 2 snow-white sugar heart eggs floated in the ginger soup, their fragrance wafting outwards, making some people drool. Shui Huaizhu was also really hungry, holding ginger soup while blowing and drinking urgently. Drink slowly. Shui Weishan reminded her, your mother should scold me again if she burns her tongue. Hee. Shui Huaizhu spat out her tongue. In fact, the original owner is truly in the midst of blessings and does not know how fortunate they are. Being able to grow up in a family that is loved and loved by parents is such a happy thing in this era. Yi Meiying's health is not good, but Shui Weishan has never despised her. Over the years, taking care of his wife and daughter has become his willingly shouldered responsibility. Previously, old lady Shui also caused trouble, saying, what is a woman who cannot give birth to a son left behind for? I should rest overnight and find another woman to come back. As a result, he was harshly scolded by Shui Weishan for the first time, saying that his wife had followed him during his poorest and most destitute years, accompanied him all the way, and almost gave birth to a daughter with her own life. If he abandoned his wife, would he still be considered a man? After washing his hands, Shui Weishan wiped them clean and said, I'll help your mother out for a walk. After you finish eating, leave the bowl here and wait for Dad to come in and wash it later. Shui Huaizhu lowered her head and focused on drinking ginger soup. Suddenly, a shadow cast over her eyes. She thought her father had returned and was about to look up and ask if there was anything else. A huge face struggled to fit into her bowl. Oh, there are 2 eggs. Immediately after, Aunt Air's sharp and sour voice sounded. We, Xiaoping and Xiaodong, are 2 boys who can only eat 1 egg a week. Shui Huaizhu, you are quite nourishing, you can eat 2 at once. Before Shui Huaizhu could react, the bowl in her hand was suddenly snatched away, and several drops of ginger soup were spilled on her hand. I'll try it. Tian Guifeng couldn't help but lower her head and gulp down half a bowl of ginger soup, and directly grabbed the sugar heart egg and put it in her mouth. Make a chattering sound while eating. Shui Huaizhu quietly watched Tian Guifeng's coquettish actions. In my memory, it wasn't the first time Aunt Air had snatched her food, otherwise she wouldn't have been so skilled and proficient in it. She remained silent, and Tian Guifeng thought she was just like any other time before, a soft persimmon held by her. Shui Huaizhu, it's not that Aunt Air said you. As Tian Guifeng stuffed food into her mouth, she didn't forget to teach her elders a lesson. Didn't you almost drown? You don't need to eat 2 eggs at once. You should keep the good things for your aunt and brothers. Anyway, you haven't died in pairs, have you? Although it was 1994 now, there has indeed been a significant improvement in living standards in first and second tier cities. But for small towns and rural areas in remote areas, people only have enough food and clothing. For most households in Gaopa town, eggs are still a nutritional supplement that they cannot bear to eat. Tian Guifeng kept chattering, but the water droplets remained silent until the bottom of the bowl was facing upwards, and there were still egg residues left at the corner of Tian Guifeng's mouth, before she spoke softly. Aunt Air, are you full? Are you delicious? Hiccup. Tian Guifeng let out a nauseating burp and then licked her mouth, saying, the taste is good. You can add more brown sugar next time, it's not sweet enough. Shui Huaizhu smiled slightly and said, why don't you personally give my dad some advice? As soon as she finished speaking, she had good luck and shouted loudly towards the outside. Dad, Mom, Auntie snatched my food to eat. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Collision with Great Evil. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Collision with Great Evil. The shout of Shui Huaizhu almost shook the entire small building. Tian Guifeng was so scared that she was completely scared that she saw Shui Weishan and Yi Meiying walking towards the kitchen at the sound of the sound. She was so scared that her 3 souls were gone. You, don't shout. Tian Guifeng threatened angrily, Shui Huaizhu, stop shouting. Believe it or not, I'll go find Qing Liye and speak ill of you. That's right, the reason why Tian Guifeng dares to openly snatch her things at home is entirely because of the original owner, that idiot. The original owner was afraid that Aunt Air would really speak ill of Qing Liye in front of her, and even if she was bullied, she held back and remained silent. Thinking of this, Shui Huaizhu wanted to slap the original owner. For the sake of a scumbag, let's see what kind of ghost you've trampled on yourself. You go find Qing Liye. Shui Huaizhu sneered, you should know where he lives, right? You don't need me to lead the way, do you? What? Tian Guifeng was stunned and looked at her in confusion. Are you really not afraid that I will speak ill of you in front of Qing Liye? Think carefully, she said. Tian Guifeng didn't forget to threaten her. Men don't like girls like you who are selfish and selfish the most. What's wrong with eating something from you? Do you need to shout? If Qing Liye knows, he will definitely not want you. It seems that the matter of divorce has not yet spread to the family. Shui Huaizhu raised her eyebrows lightly and shouted even louder, Dad. Mom. Don't shout. All the previously useful words had failed, and seeing that Shui Huaizhu was completely not threatened, Tian Guifeng was really panicked this time, pretending to be about to choke her throat. I'll spit it out and give it back to you, okay? What's going on? Despite her asthma, Yi Meiying stepped into the kitchen with one strong foot and said, Huaizhu, is someone bullying you? Mom. Shui Huaizhu pointed at Tian Guifeng and told her without hesitation, the ginger sugar eggs that Dad just cooked for me were all taken by Aunt Air. To Yi Meiying's murderous gaze, Tian Guifeng instinctively waved her hand and denied, Sister-in-law, I didn't. Is it difficult for this loser to fall into evil after falling into the water? In the past, whenever Qing Liye was mentioned, Shui Huaizhu would obediently let her knead and flatten her. Why is this method not effective today? No. Yi Meiying's nostrils trembled slightly on both sides, indicating that she was about to fight. There's nothing hanging on either side of your mouth. Yi Meiying put her hands on her hips and said, even I can't bear to eat the food I saved for my daughter. How dare you grab it? Are you still an elder? What's worse than bullshit? Tian Guifeng pulled up her sleeve and wiped her mouth hard twice. Unable to conceal it, she came up with another excuse. Sister-in-law, I'm just teasing Huaizhu. Aunt Air is not teasing me. Shui Huaizhu shook out everything Tian Guifeng had done, word by word, and said, Mom, for the past year, Aunt Air has always snatched what you have prepared for me and threatened me not to speak up. Tian Guifeng wished she could use a needle and thread to tightly sew up Shui Huaizhu's mouth. This loser has really hit a big evil. Sister-in-law, What are you, you? Yi Meiying casually picked up the bowls and chopsticks by the stove and threw them over. Get out of my mother's house. You're not allowed to stay in my mother's house anymore. Damn it, slow down a step, I'll beat your feet. Bowls and chopsticks smashed onto Tian Guifeng's body, then fell to the ground one after another, making a loud noise, attracting the other members of the family as well. What's going on? Shui Lao Tai squeezed in, and when she saw Tian Guifeng looking disheveled, she looked at the bowls and chopsticks on the ground, probably knowing the whole story. She gave Tian Guifeng a fierce goodbye. Stealing and playing tricks. See when you'll kill yourself. Mom, I really didn't have anything to grab the pearl. Fearing that she would really be kicked out overnight, Tian Guifeng hugged old lady Shui's thigh tightly and said, I'm just playing around. The house belongs to the boss, and the rice and grain at home were also bought by the boss's family. Even if Tian Guifeng was foolish, he knew he was unreasonable this time. Boss. As soon as Mrs. Shui spoke 2 words, Yi Meiying rudely interrupted, Madam, if you plead, you can go out with me. Mrs. Shui looked at Shui Mountain with a face full of grievances, with a look of, seeing your mother in law bullying me, on her face. Shui Mountain had a gloomy expression and remained silent. He doesn't have no idea what Tian Guifeng's temperament is, but this time grabbing the Huaizhu's food is too much. Mrs. Shui quickly pouted at Tian Guifeng, who was not foolish either, crying and admitting her mistake to Shui Mountain. Uncle, I feel the same pain as treating Huaizhu as my own daughter. Humph. Yi Meiying laughed sarcastically. What are you doing? Suddenly, the sound of water towering stones rang out. He had just finished work and opened the courtyard door. Everyone was crowded in the kitchen, and he couldn't help but wonder as he walked over. Dad. The child's mouth was quick, and Shui Xiaodong blurted out, Mom snatched my cousin's food to eat. Auntie wants to drive her out. What? Shui Weisher's eyes widened towards his own mother-in-law, and a strong sense of embarrassment rushed up to his head. Tian Guifeng, are you crazy? Are you also trying to eat children's food? I don't have. Tian Guifeng still needs to argue cunningly. No, wouldn't sister. In that law wrongly accuse you. Shui Weisher was an impatient person who was about to take off his shoes and pull someone when he bent down. Tian Guifeng screamed in fear and hurriedly hid behind the old lady Shui. Mom, help me. Huaizhu, come here. There was a full martial arts performance over there, and Yi Meiying didn't even move her eyebrows, pulling her daughter behind her to avoid being accidentally harmed. Don't hide behind Mom, come out. One reached out to grab someone, the other hid everywhere, and the 2 of them circled around the water old lady, causing a commotion in the yard from the kitchen. Second, stop doing it. Old lady Shui supported her temple and said, You've knocked out my old bones. Mom, don't help her. Shui Weisher stopped and said, I have to hit her today. Am I helping her? Shui Lao Tai by air glanced at him and deliberately spoke louder and louder, I pity my 2 grandsons. If my mother is kicked out, they will also be kicked out. After speaking, I still remember stealing glances at the expressions of Shui Weishan and Yi Meiying. Zhaoping, Xiaodong. Tian Guifeng knelt on the ground, holding her 2 children and crying loudly. After all, they were still children. Seeing their mother crying so sadly, the 2 brothers began to sob along. The 3rd mother and son cried in their arms, and even if Shui Weisher was ruthless, he couldn't take action. Boss. Old lady Shui shouted at Shui Mountain, you just have the heart to watch your own brothers wander on the streets. Have you been taken away by a wolf dog? Have you lost your heart? Shui Weishan frowned tightly and looked at Yi Meiying and Shui Huaizhu. Yi Meiying pursed her lips. Isn't the old lady calling her a wolf dog in disguise? What a powerful old lady. Yi Meiying tightened her daughter's hand and said coldly, you can stay, but you're not allowed to eat in the same pot as us anymore. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Split Pots. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Split Pots. It is impossible to separate families. Yi Meiying is very clear. There is an old woman who is restless and difficult to deal with in the house. Forcefully dividing the family will inevitably peel off a layer of skin. If her body allows, she is not afraid to continue fighting these people. But my body is weak. I just lifted my breath and cursed, which has already consumed most of my energy. Now, I can only stand firm by relying solely on willpower. What if she falls in the middle of the fight and leaves her husband and daughter behind? Husband, don't worry about him for now. Her delicate daughter may be torn apart by these unfamiliar relatives. So for the future of her daughter, she cannot just hold on and argue with these people at this stage. However, Yi Meiying is not used to their bad habits either. We can't divide the family, so divide the pot. Split the pot. The others were stunned for a few seconds until Yi Meiying spoke loudly. That's right, split the pots. Starting tomorrow, you'll be cooking in the miscellaneous room at the west end of the house. As Yi Meiying spoke, she walked into the kitchen and said, "Don't say I'm mean and don't care about sister-in-law relationships. You can bring these things over." She was nimble and quickly pulled out 2 burnt pots and a few broken bowls and chopsticks from the kitchen, stuffing them into the stunned Tian Gui Feng. It's enough for a few members of your family to use. Tian Gui Feng unconsciously opened her mouth, but couldn't make any sound. Hi. Shui Huaizhu was the quickest to react. Watching her mother's fierce actions, she couldn't help but give a crazy thumbs up in her heart. Mom, not to mention in the 1990s, even in palace dramas, she can still survive to the end as a big winner. Looking at myself, Shui Huaizhu proudly straightened her chest. A child with a mother is a treasure, and a mother with strong combat skills is willing to be a delicate daughter. Yi Meiying, what's the difference between this and separating families? Other people also reacted, and Mrs. Shui was the first to express dissatisfaction. The 2 brothers live together. What's the difference between cooking separately and splitting up? If outsiders see it, they can't laugh at us. Don't want outsiders to see us cooking separately. Yi Meiying sneered, then you move back to the countryside. Boss. Old Lady Shui stomped her feet in hatred and said, "Look at what your mother-in-law looks like. When I said she couldn't give birth to a son and wanted to divorce her, you refused. Look at what she has done to our good family now." Yi Meiying hates others talking about her inability to give birth to a son. She was about to curse and turn around when suddenly her head went dizzy and her body shook uncontrollably a few times, almost collapsing with anger. Suddenly, a warm and powerful hand wrapped around her arm, and the sound of water carrying pearls echoed in her ears. "Mom, don't pay attention to what Grandma says. She would love to see you being so angry." Yi Meiying clenched her daughter's hand with her back, leaned against her body, and slowly calmed her breath before returning to the old lady Shui with a calm and composed voice. "What do I look like? I look reasonable. Anyway, there are 2 ways today. One is to move out, and the other is to cook separately. What if others can give birth to a son? Look at how filial her daughter is, give her support at the most critical moment." Shui Huaizhu, who had been silent for a long time, spoke in a deep voice that could hold people down. "I support the suggestions from the United States and Britain. The second person is also someone with a wife and children, and staying in my kitchen all the time can attract gossip. It's better to go out independently as soon as possible." Shui Mountain is not a random excuse. He really believes that a man should have a sense of responsibility and responsibility. If my younger brother lives under his protection all his life, how can he grow into the head of a family? I'll listen to Big Brother. Shui Huaizhu picked up 2 pots and strode towards the miscellaneous room in the west room, cursing Tian Gui Feng, "What are you still standing there for? Come and tidy up quickly and set up the stove." Mrs. Shui looked over here and over there, with a look of resentment on her face. "Boss, you and Mr. Air are cooking separately. What about me? You don't even want the old lady anymore. The old lady naturally does not want the two brothers to be separated in her own selfish heart. The eldest family has rice and meat, and from time to time, they can still eat fresh things, and what does the second family have? Mrs. Shui was also worried that Yi Meiying would drive her to the second place, crying and saying to Shui Wei Mountain. Yi Meiying pursed her lips, knowing in her heart that this play was meant for her to watch. She really wants to drive this eccentric and selfish old lady over. Old lady, you are an elder. You hold a bowl and eat with anyone you like. Even if the host picks up one chopstick and the host picks up another chopstick, no one will say anything about you. You don't have to cry, curse, or blame your son anymore. Humph. Mr. Shui twisted his nose fiercely and then rushed to the West House to help the second family pack up their things. Everyone else had left, and Yi Meiying let out a long sigh, feeling powerless all over her body. After the commotion, she felt her bones scattered and leaned softly against Shui Huaizhu. Even though Shui Huaizhu was well prepared, she was still a thin and weak person. Her mother exerted all her strength and almost fell together. Shui Weishan's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast, so he quickly helped Yi Meiying steady, and on the other hand, he also grabbed his daughter. After Shui Huaizhu stood firm, she felt remorseful and her body was too weak. So why bother? Be careful of your own body, said Shui Weishan, half supporting and half embracing Yi Meiying as he walked upstairs to the room. If I don't separate them first, who knows how they will bully Huaizhu again next time. You're just worried too much, isn't there still me? Lao Wei, you did a great job. Yi Meiying sighed deeply and said, but if you're busy, you won't even be able to see anyone. If it's all up to you, I'm afraid we'll be driven away in the middle of the night, and you don't know. How could you say it so seriously? Mom, Shui Huaizhu said seriously, you can leave the matter of tearing and forcing to me in the future. She also wants to share the burden for her parents. We can no longer live under the protection of our parents like the original owner. Silly child. Her daughter spoke in a soft voice, and Yi Meiying couldn't help but laugh. You, be obedient. When your parents find a suitable partner for you in the future and someone takes care of you, then we can rest assured. Shui Huaizhu. It seems difficult to remove the persona of delicate woman. Tian Guifeng was crying loudly in the room, venting her grievances towards Shui Weisher. Why do you all blame me? It's not that I want to split the blame, it's Yi Meiying's crime of killing 1,000 knives. If you don't grab Huaizhu's food, will sister.in.law have to split the pot? Shui Weisher gritted his teeth and lowered his voice, you have food and shelter here. Do you still lack that bite? Are you shameless to snatch your niece's food? I just took that bite. What's wrong? What is Shui Huaizhu? Tian Guifeng whimpered and roared, I have given birth to 2 boys for your Shui family. If it weren't for me, your Shui family would have lost all their children and grandchildren. I am the greatest hero, why can't I eat? You're shameless. I'll beat you to death, mother. In.law. Shui Weisher's palm was raised high, cursing at Tian Guifeng, but his eyes kept glancing out the window. End of this chapter.